Snow knife,
Little
actually,
ones,
yeah.
yeah.
That one is over here.
I took it out actually, put it on.
Oh, on this one, so you can
Yeah.
put it over here. Okay. We would make snow houses. In the Arctic, our snow freezes and it becomes easy to cut into blocks. And so they would have a snow knife like this that they would use to make emergency shelters. In the olden days, we used these igloos for temporary facilities to emergency for if we're out hunting and caught in a storm, we could quickly put one up and it would keep us warm. When you light the stone lamp, the inside of the walls will get icy and it just solidifies it. It makes it real solid. This would be used to cut the blocks and we would shape them to fit into whatever we need. We would put them at an angle as we're going to the top, and then we would have one piece that closes the top hole. Over time, it would also be used for a story knife. So they would teach each other about, we would travel along the river over here and they would make the wiggly marks for the river. Then we would come across to this valley and they would make the mountain with the valley. And you go through this valley and that's where I caught my caribou. And so they would draw the story of the activity, or telling the children about, we want to go through this area to go to here for the best berries. And they would make their story on the ground, in the snow or in the sand. And they would use this to tell the story. This has some markings on it, so it had some decorative process that was put for it. You can see how they put a little bit of a handle here. There's also the serrated edge on the tip here, that's so that you could break down into the frozen snow and get down in, like if there had been a little bit of rain. The top of the ice would be really hard. So when you had that serrated edge, you could break through that ice on that tip. There are markings that are put on here, and it kind of almost reminds me of the dog team harnesses, how they would put the center line and then the markings for where the dogs would go in that harness. I just see that pattern with this etching. It may or may not be that, but that's what I see when I look at it. It reminds me that this person probably had a dog team and they were recognized, and so they put that additional markings as this is one of the people that has our dog team. Not everyone may have a dog team because dogs were highly valuable and it cost a lot to feed them, and so you had to do a lot of extra hunting to make sure that there was food for the dog. And so this was someone that was respected for that. There's some additional markings down here on the bottom. They may have been specifics for that individual. I can see that they've got various markings here that may have been also for ownership on here. But when I see this, it just reminds me of the dog team and how they would be tied on to these markings that come down on the sides here. And so that's what it triggers in my mind. To this day, we still use story knives, we still use snow knives. Nowadays, we might have the metal kind. You might get the bigger blades because you can get bigger chunks. But making snow houses is still done to this day. If we have an emergency out there, the weather changes, you might put up a temporary snow shelter. They may not cut out the blocks to make it if it was just one person. They may take and put snow into a mound and then hollow it out enough for that individual to go in. But to this day, that's a very important method for traveling in the Arctic and protecting us into the future. We'll continue to use them. We make them more decorative and have Spring Festival And so we encourage the families to make a snow house, and then we go and judge them on how their quality is, and that's one of our ways to keep the traditions alive. The ones that people made in the past were better than the ones who make them in the future because they don't make them all the time. Their skill isn't to that level. And so you might see there's holes, especially if you put the light in it. Oh, that's not a very good snow house, but we might go in and add snow to those areas to help cover it up. We might put water on the snow blocks to help adhese them together and to keep them strong. And we would also even put the liver cover to go over the liver, use that to make the cover on the roof, attach it to willows in a circular pattern so that we could lift it up and let the smoke out when we're cooking, and to allow light to come in as it came closer into spring before the full melt. But we would use those in places where we would go to our temporary camps. So maybe we go get Tiktaalik, the lingcod over here, but we go over here to go caribou hunting. So we might have a snow house that we use over here, but caribou hunting we do in the summer, so we might just have a tent spot over here. And so it just depended on what we're doing in the area, what type of house we would make. This one does have some wear, you can tell it's been used, but it also was probably obtained early on because it's still in very good shape. It didn't have as much wear as if it were, if it had been used for a long period of time, it would have had more wear on the front here, and it doesn't have that. The consistency and the way that it was made, there was a lot of good effort put into it. I can see this is also ivory, the markings down here on the side. This was a walrus ivory that made this. And that the skill of the person who did this, it's right at the edge of the inner part of the walrus tooth. And so they had a lot of skill to make this. They were able to take the part of the tusk, because the tusk come out and they curve down like that, but they were able to take the part of the tusks that had that strength, as well as the thickness on the outer part, and move to the thinness for the blade. So the person had skill when they were working with their ivory. There is some darker color here. So I think that this piece was a piece of ivory that was found on the beach, previous harvest that wasn't successfully landed, and then washed up on the beach later. This darker color up here, it had to have been in the water for a long time. We're looking at probably 50 to 100 years to get that color. And when they get darker, I've seen them black, you're looking at thousands of years.